Central Kentucky Humanoid. The Central Kentucky Humanoid, often referred to as the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, is one of the most well-documented cases of alleged extraterrestrial encounters in the United States. The incident took place on the night of August 21, 1955, near the small rural communities of Kelly and Hopkinsville in Christian County, Kentucky. The origin of the Central Kentucky Humanoid story begins with the Stoughton family and their friend Billy Ray Taylor. On that fateful evening, Taylor was visiting the Stoughton farmhouse when he reported to have seen a bright silvery object with an exhaust of rainbow colors silently moving through the sky before landing nearby. Initially, the Stoughton family dismissed Taylor's account as a joke. However, their skepticism quickly turned to fear when they encountered small humanoid creatures outside their home. Witnesses reported that the creatures were about 3.5 feet tall, with oversized, almost perfectly round heads, long arms that extended nearly to the ground, and hands with talon-like fingers. Their eyes were described as glowing with a yellowish light. The creatures' bodies were said to be metallic in appearance, and they seemed impervious to gunfire, as bullets reportedly bounced off them without causing harm. The encounter itself was a harrowing experience for the Stoughton family and their guests. According to their accounts, the humanoids approached the farmhouse repeatedly, peering into the windows and popping up at doorways. The family, in a state of panic, fired guns at the creature for nearly 4 hours, attempting to fend them off. Despite their efforts, the beings seemed undeterred and continued their visitation. The incident quickly gained widespread attention, with the Stoughton family and their friends arriving at the Hopkinsville police station in a state of genuine terror. Their story was taken seriously by local authorities, who conducted an investigation at the farmhouse. While no physical evidence of the creatures was found, the police did observe signs of gunfire and damage to the property, lending some credibility to the family's claims. Over the years, the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter has been the subject of much debate and speculation. UFOlogists regard it as one of the most significant and well-documented cases in the history of UFO incidents, while skeptics argue that the sightings were most likely the result of excitement and misidentification of natural phenomena such as meteors and owls. However, the United States Air Force, in its Project Blue Book files, classified the incident as a hoax. Donald Shrum Humanoid. The Cisco Grove robots incident is one which took place on September 4, 1964, in Cisco Grove, Placer County, California. It involves an encounter between a hunter and what he described as extraterrestrial beings. The story begins with 28-year-old Donald Shrum and his friends on a bow and arrow hunting trip in the dense forest of Cisco Grove. As night fell, Shrum became separated from his group and decided to sleep in a tree for safety. His peaceful night took a dramatic turn when he noticed a white light moving in a zigzag pattern through the trees. Initially mistaking it for a helicopter, Shrum jumped down and lit flares to attract attention, thinking his friends had launched a rescue mission. As the light approached and stopped about 50 yards away, Shrum realized it was not a helicopter, but something far more unusual. From this object emerged 3 beings, 2 humanoid figures and 1 robot-like entity. The robots were described as metallic and 4 feet tall, with elongated arms and claw-like hands. They emitted a humming sound and were capable of releasing a white vapor that rendered Shrum unconscious. The encounter escalated as the beings attempted to dislodge Shrum from the tree. In a state of panic, Shrum used his bow and arrows to defend himself, managing to hit the robot and cause sparks to fly, indicating a metallic surface. Despite his efforts, the beings continued their assault throughout the night, with Shrum reportedly losing consciousness due to the vapor. At one point, additional beings arrived and a large volume of smoke caused Shrum to black out completely. When he woke up, the beings were gone and he was barely hanging from the tree by his belt. Shrum was eventually rescued and reunited with his friends, one of whom had also seen the UFO, corroborating part of his story. Despite investigations by local authorities and UFO researchers, no concrete evidence has been found to confirm the evidence of the Cisco Grove robots. Maria Pretzel Humanoid. The 1968 Maria Pretzel Villa Carlos Paz incident is one of the lesser-known cases in the annals of UFO and humanoid encounters. The incident took place in the town of Villa Carlos Paz in central Argentina. The origin of this incident dates back to June 14, 1968. Maria Elodia Pretzel, a resident of Villa Carlos Paz, was in the process of closing up her family's motel for the night. As she went about her routine, she encountered something that would forever change her perception of reality. According to her, she saw a strange being standing near the motel. This being was described as having a flat-topped head and wearing a tight-fitting suit. What made the encounter even more bizarre was the object that the entity was holding, a disco ball-like device that emitted a peculiar light. Maria described the entity as humanoid, but with distinct differences that set it apart from any known human or animal. Maria reported feeling a mix of fear and curiosity as she observed the being. The entity did not make any aggressive moves towards her. After a few moments, the being and the strange light disappeared, leaving Maria in a state of shock and confusion. This incident quickly gained attention within the local community and among UFO researchers. Researchers who investigated the incident found no evidence of a hoax or any logical explanation for what Maria had witnessed. The case remains unsolved, with many speculating about the nature of the being and the purpose of its visit. The Crow, the Slasher, and the Saw. Mark led a simple life working on a dairy farm in California. His routine was ordinary until one night in August of 2019. While working late at 3:15 a.m., he heard unusual voices behind the hay barn. Thinking it was intruders, he went to investigate, only to encounter something far more bizarre and potentially dangerous than he had ever expected. Mark was the only one working the night shifts at the large dairy farm, where the lights couldn't illuminate the entire area, leaving most of it in darkness. Responsible for all ongoing tasks, he fought off fatigue while making his rounds. At the back of the dairy, near the feed truck, he heard voices behind the hay barn. Investigating, he found no source and returned to his work. The voices reappeared, prompting another fruitless search. Determined to catch the intruders, he set an alarm for 8 minutes, planning to use the truck's headlights to expose them before taking his break. The night took a bizarre turn when Mark suddenly found himself in a room with a door. Before he could process the change, the door flew open and a man with a knife charged at him. The man was described as having no facial expression. Whether the man was literally faceless or just had a deadpan look is unclear. Shocked, Mike sidestepped the attack, causing the man to fall and lie still, seemingly dead. As Mark stood over him, he noticed he wasn't breathing. Another door opened and two more beings emerged. One of the beings was a tall man with a crow-like face, possibly a mask, while the other had a contorted, twisted smile and wore a business suit with an unbuttoned shirt. This contorted figure grabbed Mark's wrist and revealed a spinning circular saw blade in its chest, attempting to pull Mark into it. Panicking, Mark fought back, forcing the creature to the ground, where it died like its previous attacker. Standing among the bodies, Mark saw the crow-faced being silently walk away through a door. As it closed, Mark found himself back in the feed truck. Mark was drenched in sweat and noticed extremely hot handprints on his wrist, despite there being no heater in the truck. Terrified and disoriented, he ran back to the dairy, feeling as if something was breathing down his neck. Upon returning, he realized only 5 minutes had passed, with 3 minutes remaining on his 8-minute timer. He eventually concluded that he had encountered demonic forces. The Indescribable Lurker of Llantarnam. The tale of the Indescribable Lurker dates back to some time before 1813. The primary account of this entity comes from a young man named Edward Frank, whose encounter was recorded in Reverend Edmund Jones' collection of ghost stories from Monmouthshire County. This collection, titled A Relation of Apparitions in Wales, provides a detailed narrative of Frank's chilling experience. The lurker is described as a tall, dark, and utterly inexplicable figure. Edward Frank's encounter with the entity occurred one night as he was walking home. He heard something approaching him, and upon looking, he saw a figure that struck him with dread. The entity's appearance was so terrifying that Frank could only describe it as indescribable, a term that had since become synonymous with the Lurker. Despite the fear it instilled in him, Frank managed to muster the courage to confront the entity, demanding it to move out of his way in the name of God. Surprisingly, the Lurker vanished immediately upon his command. However, Frank's ordeal did not end there. He was soon overcome with a hysterical sense of panic and disorientation, encountering two more anomalous objects described as dawn-colored and shaped like posts. After the Lurker vanished, Frank stumbled upon a cow in a nearby field and leaned against it for protection. His fear was so intense that he remained there until the entities he had seen also disappeared. Seeking human contact and safety, Frank eventually found his way to a nearby house, where a woman he knew allowed him to stay the night after recognizing his distress. Another guest in the house, a religious man named Abraham Llewellyn, overheard Frank's story and later related it to Reverend Edmund Jones. The Reverend then recorded the story in his book, A Relation of Apparition in Wales. Edward Frank's encounter with the indescribable Lurker is the most well-documented sighting of this entity. Burning Man of the Black Forest. The earliest account of the Burning Man of the Black Forest dates back to the medieval period in Germany. This entity is often linked to elemental beings that embody natural forces such as fire. The Burning Man is described as a humanoid entity engulfed in flames, yet seemingly unaffected by the fire that surrounds it. It is reminiscent of the comic book superhero, the Human Torch. Witnesses report seeing a figure that radiates intense heat and light, with flames that flicker and dance around its body. One of the most notable encounters with the Burning Man occurred in a small village within the Black Forest. According to the story, a flaming humanoid was seen flying around the village before coming to rest on a church steeple. The terrified villagers, believing they were witnessing a demonic apparition, gathered around the church and began throwing rocks at the fiery figure. After a prolonged standoff, the Burning Man eventually departed, never to be seen again. A Pale Stranger on the Promenade. The tale of a pale stranger on the promenade originates from an encounter experienced by Neville and Barbara Jacques during their holiday in the Canary Islands. This incident took place between November and December of 2012. The couple, hailing from northeast England's Cleveland County, were enjoying a peaceful walk along a high promenade situated on a volcanic rock face directly at the sea's edge. The encounter occurred around 4 p.m. as the couple walked back to their hotel. Initially, they noticed the strange figure about 100 meters ahead of them. As the man approached, Neville felt an uncomfortable sensation, as if the stranger was watching him, despite the dark glasses obscuring his eyes. The entity encountered by the Jacques couple was a tall, thin man, approximately 6'2" in height. He was dressed in an unusual manner, wearing a wide-rimmed black hat, dark sunglasses reminiscent of the 1960s, a long-sleeved shirt, a light-colored jumper draped over his shoulders, and long trousers. His most striking feature was his skin, which appeared deathly pale, almost translucent, as if he were plastered in sunblock. His face was narrow and sunken, with angular features highlighted by prominent cheekbones. The man's hands were large, with noticeable large pale fingers. The couple initially laughed at the odd appearance of the man, but their amusement quickly turned to dread as he drew closer. When the man was about 5 feet away, the full fear factor of the situation became apparent. His skin was not covered in sunblock. It was naturally that white and pale. His skin was almost translucent, and his glasses wrapped around the entirety of the area around his eyes. The Jacques couple quickly realized that this was no ordinary person. They guessed that the man appeared to be in his 60s. As the entity passed the horrified couple, he turned his head to look directly at Neville and spoke with a kind of acknowledging manner. He said something which the Jacques couple couldn't even begin to understand. According to them, it didn't sound like a human language. It was high and low pitched at the same time and very short. The strange entity then left, and the Jacques couple found it odd that they neither followed him nor took a photo. Back at their hotel, Neville couldn't stop thinking about the encounter and discussed it constantly with Barbara. He insisted the man wasn't from this world and that his appearance was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Neville struggled to sleep, haunted by the image of the man whenever he tried to, which plagued his thoughts for the rest of their holiday. Later, Neville heard Nick Radfern on Coast to Coast AM discussing the Men in Black and was shocked to see an artist's impression that almost perfectly resembled the pale stranger. He contacted Redfern to share his story later on. The Pamir Snowman. The Pamir Snowman, often referred to as the Abominable Snowman or Yeti, is a cryptid said to inhabit the Pamir Mountains, a range located in Central Asia. Similar to the Yeti of the Himalayas, the Pamir Snowman is believed to be a large ape-like creature that roams the high-altitude regions. The creature is often described as being between 6 to 9 feet tall with a muscular build. It is said to be covered in thick, shaggy fur, which can range in color from reddish-brown to grey or white, depending on the season and the specific sighting. Witnesses often describe the snowman as having a somewhat human-like face. The Pamir Snowman is typically depicted as a reclusive and elusive creature, avoiding human contact and living in remote, inaccessible areas of the mountains. One of the earliest documented sightings was by Russian explorers in the early 1900s. They reported seeing large human-like footprints in the snow at high altitude. In the 1950s, several expeditions were launched to find evidence of the snowman. One such expedition, led by a Soviet scientist, claimed to have found hair samples and footprints, though these findings were never conclusive, proving to belong to an unknown species. In more recent times, sightings have become rarer, possibly due to increased human activity in the region. However, there are still occasional reports from local shepherds and mountaineers who claim to have seen the creature or found its tracks. 8 to 9 feet tall whistling disfigured humanoid. The 8 to 9 feet tall whistling disfigured humanoid, often referred to as the Whistler, is a creature said to roam the remote forests and desolate areas. There are various theories attempting to explain its existence. Some believe it to be a supernatural entity, a spirit of the forest that has taken on a grotesque form. Others suggest it could be a result of genetic mutations or a remnant of an ancient species that has managed to survive in isolation. Folklore from different regions often attributes its origin to a tragic backstory, where a once human figure was cursed or transformed due to some grave misdeed. The Whistler is described as a towering figure standing between 8 to 9 feet tall. Its most distinctive feature is its disfigured appearance, with twisted limbs and a gaunt skeletal frame. The skin is often described as pale or greyish, sometimes appearing almost translucent under certain lights. The face is particularly unsettling, with hollow eyes and a mouth that seems permanently twisted in a grimace. The creature earned its name due to the whistles it makes. One notable sighting occurred in the dense forest of the Appalachian region. A group of hikers reported hearing a strange whistling sound that seemed to follow them as they trekked deeper into the woods. As night fell, they noticed a tall, shadowy figure standing at the edge of their campsite. The figure did not approach but remained at a distance, its whistling growing louder and more insistent. The hikers described feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, prompting them to abandon their campsite and flee the area. Upon returning with authorities the next day, they found no traces of the figure, but noted that the ground where it had stood was scorched and barren. Another encounter was reported by a lone traveler driving through a remote stretch of the road in the Pacific Northwest. The traveler recounted seeing a tall, disfigured figure standing by the roadside, illuminated by the car's headlights. As the traveler slowed down to get a better look, the figure began to whistle, a sound that seemed to penetrate the very fabric of the night. Terrified, the traveler sped away, glancing in the rearview mirror to see the figure slowly fading into the darkness. Chupacabra. The Chupacabra's name is derived from the Spanish words chupa, which means to suck, and cabra, which means goat, vividly describing its most infamous activity. The name comes from the animal's reported vampirism. The Chupacabra is said to attack and drink the blood of livestock, including goats. The legend of the Chupacabra originated in Puerto Rico in the mid-1990s. The first reported attack attributed to the Chupacabra occurred in March 1995, when 8 sheep were found dead, each with 3 puncture wounds in the chest area and completely drained of blood. This incident sparked widespread fear and curiosity, leading to numerous reports of similar attacks across Puerto Rico and eventually other parts of the Americas. Descriptions of the creature vary according to regions. In Puerto Rico and other parts of Hispanic America, the creature is often described as a reptilian alien-like being, roughly the size of a small bear, with a row of spines reaching from its neck to the base of its tail. In contrast, sightings in the southwestern United States often describe the Chupacabra as more dog-like. The Chupacabra has been reported in various locations. One of the most notable early sightings occurred on August 1995, when an eyewitness named Madeline Tolentino reported seeing the creature in the Puerto Rican town of Canovanas, where as many as 150 farm animals and pets were reportedly killed. Puerto Rican comedian and entrepreneur Silverio Perez is credited with coining the term Chupacabra soon after the first incidents were reported in the press. Despite numerous reports, the existence of the Chupacabra remains unproven. The Blue Man of Bad Axe. The legend of the Blue Man of Bad Axe, Michigan, began in the spring of 1958. It was a time when the fear of the unknown was heightened by the Cold War, and the fascination with UFOs and extraterrestrial beings was at its peak. The Blue Man was described as a humanoid figure with a glowing blue appearance. The figure was often seen at night. The first sighting of the Blue Man occurred when a group of teenagers driving on the country roads near Bad Axe reported seeing a blue figure looming out of the darkness and running alongside their car with flickering lights. This sighting quickly spread through the community, leading to a series of reported encounters. One of the most notable encounters happened when a school bus full of kids from Elton Junior High spotted the Blue Man on their way home from a trip to Bad Axe. The sighting caused a stir, and the story of the Blue Man began to gain nationwide attention. Despite the initial fear and excitement, it was eventually revealed that the Blue Man was a prank. In this atmosphere of anxiety and curiosity of UFOs and extraterrestrials, 3 young men from the small village of Elkton, Michigan, decided to play a prank on their entire community and beyond. Don West, Jerry Sprague, and Leroy Schlotz, inspired by a popular song titled Little Blue Man, created a costume using long underwear, an old football helmet, a bedsheet, gloves, styrofoam, Christmas lights, old boots, and fluorescent spray paint. Their goal was to bring some excitement to their quiet town. Hairy Man of Vergas Trail. The Hairy Man of Vergas Trail is a legend from Vergas, a small town in Ottawa County in the west-central Minnesota. The origin of the Hairy Man legend dates back to the 1960s. It is said that this creature, standing around 8 feet tall, with long shaggy hair and a distinct musky odor, roams the woods surrounding the Vergas trails. The hairy man is always described as being barefoot, an unusual trait given the harsh Minnesota winters. The legend reached its peak in the 1970s and gradually faded in the 1980s, but it never completely disappeared from local consciousness. Some accounts also note the hairy man's aggressive behavior, particularly towards animals, which has led to speculations that it might be responsible for unexplained wildlife deaths in the area. One of the most notable encounters with the hairy man was reported by Ken Zitzel. He claimed that the creature leaped in front of his car one night, pounding on the hood with great force, leaving dents as evidence of the encounter. Another chilling story comes from Cheryl Hansen, who as a child saw the hairy man emerge from an old cabin while she was snowmobiling. She vividly recalls the creature's imposing figure and the fear it instilled in her. In addition to these personal accounts, there have been physical findings. A human-like skull was discovered in the Klondike area where most sightings occur. However, this discovery was never reported to the authorities, leaving its origins and connections to the hairy man unknown. The legend of the hairy man of Vergas trial was even featured on Sci-Fi's Haunted Highways in 2012, bringing national attention to it. Despite the investigations and numerous theories, conclusive evidence proving the existence of the hairy man remains elusive. Whether the hairy man is a figment of imagination, a misunderstood hermit, or a creature is yet to be classified.